We're very, very fortunate tonight. And when he wrote me, he wrote me just a sweet little email to say, thank you for having all these editors at LACPUG to talk about the craft. And because there isn't a lot of places in Los Angeles for editors, for post-production people to go and talk and share their experiences. And this is one of those places. And he was sweet enough to just say thank you. And I said, and then when he told me who he was, I went, holy cow, why don't you come to LACPUG and talk to us? Because I was very impressed. And he said yes. And we're very fortunate. So I want to tell you a little bit about him tonight. This is Kabir Akhtar, right?
Wow.
I did that.
Yes, I don't even do that anymore.
Really? Well, I did that.
It makes ordering stuff on the phone very difficult.
Anyway, you are a director.
I am.
You are a director and an Emmy-nominated editor.
Yes.
And with credits of over 300 hours of television. I bet you this is an old resume, and I bet you have 400 hours of television.
Let's go for, yes.
Yeah, let's go for that. Anyway, his works include Arrested Development, for goodness sakes, the Academy Awards, The Daily Show, the Emmy Awards, Mumbai Calling, Unsolved Mysteries, and New Girl. In fact, he just came from New Girl tonight. He sped from 20th Century Fox to get here on time, and we really appreciate it. We know you're really tired, and we'll give you a sandwich and a glass of wine later. And anyway, it's Mumbai Calling and at the Skywalker Ranch, a short film for Comedy Central, Lucasfilm. He was nominated for an Emmy in 2012 for editing the opening. We need to talk about this.
Yeah.
The opening film for the Oscars, and nominated again for 2013 for editing Arrested Development. His work on the 2006 Oscars was also nominated for an Emmy for Best Editing for a Special. So not only are you editing Arrested Development and New Girl, you're editing the Oscars and you're editing the Emmys. It's like you're editing all these different genres. And how do you do that? Is that fun doing all these different genres rather than, say, 5-6 years on a comedy?
Yeah, I think so. I have a lot of friends who jump around from show to show. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, welcome. Kabir. You know, that's one of the things I am. I'm the worst introduction person. I give terrible introductions, and so it's a...
That was really good.
No, well, thank you.
If I was going to write one, I would write it exactly like that.
Exactly.
And post it on my website.
You can come back anytime.
Thank you.
But really, it's what was the Oscars like? I mean, that was an opening film. You weren't the guy snapping the fingers and editing as you were going, right? You did the opening film.
Right. We shot it. It was shot like a month ahead of time.
Right.
And, we had a few weeks to cut it together. It was just like making a short film that just happened to open the Academy Awards, which was a lot of fun. Because, I used to, obviously, we all know those Billy Crystal, shorts that he does where he's like in all the movies that were nominated that year. And I'd, seen him before, and the opportunity came to work on one, and I was like, absolutely. That sounded like a lot of fun.
So how did you get the gig? I mean, what did you do before to get that particular gig?
I was sleeping with the right people.
Good. So we're finally telling the truth here at LACPUG.
I've slept with the wrong people.
Okay. I think we all have. But that'll be a question for the audience.
Become very honest very quickly.
All right, Arrested Development. I mean, I don't know, how many here are fans of it? How many here have seen it before? It's a really good show, but you were involved in that binge thing with Netflix, I'm assuming, where they did the whole 15 episodes together. Am I wrong on that one?
No, I was the supervising editor on season 4, which just ran in May.
Okay, because I'm an idiot, what is a supervising editor? He's the supervisor of all the editors?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of shows now, a lot of these shows have finishing editors where we'll have someone who will wind up just doing a final pass on every episode. So for example, on that show, there were 3 of us originally, and then there were 6 of us at the end because there was just so much work. And there was one person that would wind up just finishing all the shows, and that was me.
But this was all of a sudden 15 episodes for all of us to watch at the same time, just like what I think is what's going to happen in the future. We're going to have a lot of episodes to watch in a binge sort of way. And so how did that work? Should we show this clip now that you brought with us?
I don't think we're ready.
We're not ready. So could you give us an idea how this whole thing worked?
The job or the
Well, the
dovetailing
whole
thing?
job. I mean, because you gave us 15 episodes all of a sudden. So we're now watching 15 episodes. How the hell did you do that? Or how the hell did they do that?
Well, I don't know. A lot of my friends came up to me like the day after. They're like, that was something. I watched that whole thing in like 8 hours.
Yeah.
I'm like, it took us 9 months.
Right.
And everyone's like, are there going to be more? I'm like, it took us a year. Stop. Like, and I mean, obviously, I'm on the other side of that too. I hate to admit, I was very late to the Breaking Bad party and only started, like a month ago and went through the whole thing in 3 weeks.
Yeah, we have a couple of people out here and now going through it right now, and they're going through withdrawal.
Yeah, I'm like, and my friend Kelly, who actually was spoken here before, she was editing the show, and I said the same thing, like, more, and like, no, slow down, So I know what that's like as a fan. I mean, I was excited to work on Arrested Development as a fan of the show. The opportunity came along. Again, I mean, it's the tongue-in-cheek answer is, well, it's all about who you know and who you sleep with, but really, it's about who you know.
Yeah, but
You don't have to sleep with the right people.
was it one episode at a time, or was it going back from, all right, they're shooting episode 13, and then now they're doing something different with episode 1, and now they're shooting episode 8, and they're doing something with 2, and when you're doing that many episodes and you're going to send it out to the world 9 months later, is it kind of back and forth from the last one to the first one to the middle to the...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
That must
production...
drive you nuts.
I thought it was great.
Oh.
It was a lot of fun.
Because it's different.
Well, I mean, it was a real challenge. I mean, New Girl right now, I mean, we're a normal sort of show on a normal sort of schedule where one episode is shot a week, and, every few weeks we crank another episode out and get it out of the way, and then it airs, and then it's gone, and it's done, The episode that aired last night, I don't know if anyone saw it, I mean, I cut it, and it's over. I don't have to worry about it anymore. And on Arrested, we started shooting in August, and we aired in May. And we were still going back to some of that August footage in May.
Wow.
Like, it was just, there was no, and they weren't shot one at a time. The whole thing, because of cast availability and like location availability, was shot like one 8-hour movie, where just different pieces were shot whenever we could get them.
Did you get the New Girl gig from Arrested Development, or is it again from Sleeping with the Right People?
Those are the same thing.
We're taping this, but we won't put it up.
No,
There's
it's okay.
nobody listening.
That's nobody. I'm
So
not
we have
even
an
telling
audience
the
of
truth. I'm
6.
just I'm not even really Kabir. I just walked in. You don't know me.
We'll actually put a little blur thing in your face. It's like, don't worry.
My connection to New Girl was that Arrested was a 20th Century Fox show. And right at the end of Arrested Development, when it was becoming clearer and clearer that we had an incredible amount of work to do and we weren't going to get it done on time.
Wow.
We just started adding editors to help. And one of the guys we brought on was an excellent editor who was the supervising guy on New Girl. And so we kind of bonded through our, trial by fire. And he was like, hey, I'd love to have you on New Girl. And they had an open spot, and so here we go.
Seriously, how important is this knowing the right people and the luck involved with the people that you work with and in order to get the gig? I mean, you've started 16, 17 years ago. How tough was it then versus now?
I don't know. I have no idea what it's like to start now, just because I'm not starting now. I feel like it must be much harder. It would be my guess, is that it's much harder. Because when I started, in film school, I had done like cut stuff on film and started working on an Avid. And when I moved out here, I felt like there weren't tons of people cutting.
Where were
Avid.
you before you moved out here?
I went to college in Philadelphia,
Philadelphia?
at Penn, and then I went to grad school at the University of Miami for film school.
Why? University of Miami?
I got in.
Okay.
I don't like talking about it.
Why? Was it worth it?
I had one professor there who made all the difference. He, really pushed me really hard, and really wrote me about editing. And I found out that I was really good at it, and I really liked it. And they had one Avid, and he put me in charge of it. I became the Avid TA. He wrote my cell phone number up on the wall, and was like, if anybody's got any problems with the Avid at any time, day or night, call Kabir. I'm like, I don't know. Okay.
Are you a techie guy?
I was. Now
Was?
yeah, I feel like, I mean, I used to get calls all the time like, well, I'm scrubbing through and I can't get audio. And I'm like, well, hold down caps lock. And they're like, oh. And I was like, yeah, I know something. You know, even when I moved here, you know, and there was another guy who's the other avid guy at school, got me a job in Miami. Like right after graduation, he threw my name into a local cable. It wasn't even a cable station. It was like a local access station where, you know, I remember this is like, it's funny because I, you know, right out of school, like, you had like long hair and like I didn't have, I was just, you know, in a band and not really thinking about work. And I'd been making like a couple $100s a month as a TA. You know, they got this phone call and they're like, hi, we'd like you to come in on this one day. It was Memorial Day. If you wanted to come in and cut an open title sequence for our little cable show. I called them back and I was like, that sounds great. Of course, I'd love to do that. And they're like, and the rate is, you know, $2.25. I'm like, $2.25 an hour is really low. I'm like, all right. But whatever. I was like, whatever. I'll take the job. I just wanted to get out there and cut, you know. When I got there, and I just, you know, they're like, here's like, you know, a bunch of like tapes, and here's a CD with like the open title theme that we have, and just, you know, go ahead and cut something together. And I'm like, I don't know how to hook up this Avid. I don't know what the drives are like. I didn't know, like, you know, knowing now that like, well, all the systems are all routed differently, and they're all like, you know, just, there's someone in the building that knows how they all work, and how the drives work, and how all this works. And I'm like, so I just went and asked somebody, just because I didn't know. I mean, that's what I would do now, but I just went and asked somebody, and they showed me, and I loaded in some footage, and you know, after a little while, I'm like, I didn't know what to do. Like, again, I would go and get the producer and be like, do you want to look at this? And can we talk about it? If this is going the right way? And they came in and they're like, whoa, this is, you know, we really like this. You know, we'd like you to stay. I just realized that where the story ends and it's being recorded. And they're like, well, you know, we'd really like you to stay. And I'm like, well, by then I had figured out that it was $2.25 a day. I was like, this is amazing. And then walking around, talking to people in the office, I heard a lot of people complaining about like not getting paid very much. And, you know, I like thinking about little 23-year-old me being like, yeah, I can stay for the whole week, but $2.25 is not my normal rate. And they're like, all right, we can raise it. And they went up like a fair amount. And I'm like, this is amazing. Editing is the best.
That's kind of weird because usually the old adage is if you want to hear an editor complain, give him work.
Yeah, I do that.
Or it's the same thing with an actor. What makes a good editor, especially with comedy?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. You know, it's funny because that first show happened to be like, it was a terrible comedy, but like it was a comedian who would go around on the beach and just talk to people. You know,
Is that more fun to do a terrible comedy though, and try to make something out of it?
that one was fun. Actually, the comedian.
Because, I mean, comedy it's your sensibility and other people's sensibilities, and it's trying to make it work for everybody else. But is that more fun than working on a show like New Girl, which is very professional, very good actors, very good writing. It's funny. It makes me laugh, makes me smile. Arrested Development, same thing. That's, I would think, not as hard. You could maybe mess up a little bit, and it's still going to be good.
No, I think quite the opposite.
Really?
Totally. I think a terrible comedy.
Good. I'd love to be argued with.
I love to argue with people.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay.
I think that a terrible comedy is just depressing to work on. 'Cause, you know, you can feel like it's got rhythms of jokes, like people are talking, but it's just not actually funny. Like, I was going down the street, and this happened. Really? Yeah. Well, it feels like it could have been a joke, but it wasn't funny.
Okay.
You know, a good comedy, like, you have to be careful with it in post. You can really break it.
Yeah.
You know, you can have moments on set, and as a director too, but like, you can have moments on set where you get footage back, and you're like, oh, this is funny. You're watching takes, and you can see that this is funny, but you're cutting stuff together, oftentimes from different performances. I'm taking, like, you know, you had a good take, then I had a good take, then you had a good take, and I'm like, you need to make sure that not only are we picking ones that match, I can't just take all of your best stuff and all my best stuff and just like have it work, because it doesn't.
Do you have those moments when you find those wonderful takes and it's really funny to you, and the person that you're working for does not find it funny and wants the other take?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the timing to be slower or the timing to be different?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know.
And how do you deal with that with your sensibility? Because I think, I mean, you're probably kind of guy that you're charming, obviously, and maybe you can charm your way into getting it your way, but maybe not. And how do you deal with it? Because it's not your show.
It's not your show. That's, I mean, the bottom line is, you know, I feel like there's a lot of stuff, like when you're working, you can work on stuff. You can kind of go out there and make whatever you want, which I have a lot of friends that do that, but I'm certainly not opposed to, you know, getting paid to do stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like.
And giving your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, you know, getting paid to give your opinion is delightful.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
God, this thing is flying. Can we show this thingy now? Do we?
Yeah.
Is it ripe? Is this the time?
I could set it up if you want.
Okay,
I feel like
go
we
ahead and
didn't
set
really
it up,
get into the complicated nature of Arrested Development specifically.
This is actually really cool. I really like this. But when I click on it, it automatically starts playing.
Oh,
and
so
I can't stop it. I don't know what keyboard shortcuts to do here.
All right, so I'll set it up.
Okay.
All right, so you've seen Arrested Development season 4, at least some of it, hopefully. Some of you, maybe? Okay. Yes, well done. So the season, for those of you that haven't seen it, it's about to be completely ruined. Not completely ruined. But what we were talking about, the nature of the season and the way they shot it, but mostly than the way that we cut it, was that it was entirely interwoven. You know, each episode, each character, each of the 9 main characters had an episode dedicated to them. Some had 2. And each of their stories covered the same time period. So, in effect, we kept seeing the same scenes and the same moments from different characters' points of view. Like we might have been following Michael, you know, out this morning, prepping this and coming here. And then in my episode, we would have followed me over at work, driving here and hoping I got here on time. And we would see how in both of our lives, this conversation, you know, actually is sort of completely different. And later on, we'll remember different parts of this. I mean, it's being recorded, but we'll remember different parts of this, and different parts will have been relevant to our stories. And so what this is that we're about to see is I went through the season and found a bunch of scenes that take place in the first episode, which is Michael's, played by Jason Bateman, who's sort of the main character of the show. And intercut them against instances throughout the season where we came back and saw those same moments through other characters' points of view. And what you'll see is that the way it was cut was that you might see this part of a conversation in one scene, in one episode, but see a different part of it entirely. Like, we were just cutting, I'll watch it and we'll talk about it some more. I'm shutting up.
Hi, I was a huge fan of the every season of Arrested Development, but I was wondering, was there additional challenges in that season 4 with it being so patchworked to put the shows together and edit? If you had any additional things that you had to think about and take care of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I think hopefully, you know, that reel also helped give a sense of that like, there were things that happened in episode 1, for example, that set up the entire rest of the season that once we committed to them in the first show, we were coming back to them over and over and over and over. Something like, you know, there are things that happened where it's like, we had to make choices about like what to show, what camera angles to use to set up jokes, like reveals that someone was in the room later that like we weren't able to show early in the, you know, to set up jokes and story. I mean, yes is the answer to your question. There's a lot. There was a ton. I mean, I feel like with a lot of shows, you sort of have the benefit of, in a way, you have the benefit of committing to an episode first and having it lock and having it air. For example, like, you know, I had a show air last night that, you know, we'll refer back to later in the season, but it's over, you know? There's no going back and changing it. And in our case, we were living with, like, instead of locking a show a week and, like, getting closer and closer to an air date, we had a lot of shows that were all unlocked at once. You know that one where you have a cardboard box and you fold down the things like this, and the first 3 are easy and the last one's obnoxious, because you kind of do that one? That's what that was like. I hope that helps.
More questions? If anybody in the middle, will come. Oh, I'm going to have to go all the way over to the other side.
Keep doing this. Keep alternating. This is kind of fun.
No, see, if I don't carry this microphone, people won't raise their hands. So, all right, you sir.
kind of interesting to me because I know when you write for shows, it's like the teaser, and then you have your 4 acts, and then you have the tag at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, this is actually hard to ask the question. When you write for that much, where you're doing that much back to back, is the whole thing written like a movie, where it's just like everything is there and you just shoot straight through it, or do you still stick to the same structure and it's just a whole bunch of scripts that you can all put together? How do you do that much? I know it's projected and you know how it's going to end, but how do you shoot that? Is it shot more like a movie? You just take the pieces and put it together, or is it done the same way you would just show by show by show? How is it done?
Oh, this was shot completely more like a movie, like piece by piece. You know, it was like getting in Legos from all different parts of a thing and having to build a whole enormous thing at once. But the pieces, I mean, yeah, the pieces came in completely out of order, you know? So there were certainly, like, as we were going, we had a sense of what it was going to be, an idea. I mean, it's like any show. Like, you have an idea of what it's going to be. You can read the script and be like, well, this is what it's going to roughly be like. And, you know, tons of it comes in totally different, depending on, you know, how good the director was, how good the cast was that day. And then there's certainly some amount of, you know, problem solving, shall we say.
With the Netflix, you don't have to worry so much about commercials. Did you have the act break? Was it still a teleplay? Was it still a sitcom kind of version? Was it still, you got to end on this particular note just in case it goes away from Netflix to syndication someplace?
No, you know, those are both interesting questions. The season is set up, I think, very much to set the season, I'm just talking because I'm tired. The season clearly sets up more. Like, the story is not over, you know? Whether or not we actually get to do more is a whole different question. And if I actually get invited to do more, that's yet another question. But, like, act breaks is an interesting thing, too. I mean, certainly for New Girl, we have to deliver a show that's 21 and a half minutes long every week for Fox. But for Netflix, they were like, do whatever you want, just make it right, you know? They just sort of, here you go. So we kept it trying to feel like it was a 4-act TV show with act breaks that we just built in because, I mean, for a comedy, you get an extra punchline out of cutting to commercial, you know?
Yeah.
You have a moment there where it's like you've sort of been building up momentum and going fast and you can just stop. I mean, you have shows like, you know, Flight of the Conchords and these like HBO half hours or Entourage where there is no act break and it's just paced differently. You know, we can kind of like run up to a commercial and stop and then start again every sort of 6, 7, 8 minutes.
Did Arrested Development change for the Netflix version versus the other ones with act breaks and the timing and everything?
We were longer, and sometimes we would have more act breaks because nobody was counting. And they got us a free punchline every now and then. Okay. That's good. It's working. Keep moving.
Back to part of the answer that you came up with. How fluid was it once you started filming, and how, you know, how much change happened once the shooting started? You know, you mentioned that on any given day the director might have done something, or the actors they may not have been on that day. Or how fluid did it get? How much change went on from the start to the end, and how much did the editors have to play in that? Did you have to make up a lot of things? Did you have to fix a lot of things? Or was it mapped out pretty well and the change wasn't that much?
You mean like fluid story, fluid script-wise?
Script-wise, everything-wise, editing. How fluid did it get?
I feel like it didn't get any more fluid than most things do, but I feel like most things get very fluid very quickly. You know, I think everyone goes into it, you know, the best people go into it with a really good plan, and stuff just changes anyway, you know?
Right.
I mean, the opening film I did for the Oscars with Billy Crystal, I mean, doing something like that where you have, you know, you're kind of, we did an animatic before the thing was shot. Like, every shot was that we already had a version of it, like, storyboarded out completely and cut roughly to music. But then you get talent on set, and talent happens to be really funny, and there's just a lot more jokes than you expected. Right. And you're like, well, you can't not use this part. You can't not use this part, and you can't not, you know, like, and so there's the plan. The plan starts crumbling, but, you know,
right, and
eventually turns into something better.
I would assume with 8 hours, you know, if you have 8 hours, there's going to be a lot of that. Because if you're thinking of it as an 8-hour film.
Well, I mean, for example, it wasn't supposed to be 15 episodes when we started.
Oh, really?
So let's talk about fluid.
Yeah, there you go.
So all your experience, excuse me, is you have tons of experience. Is all your experience cutting on the Avid, or is it cutting on other software? And how, well, answer that question first.
I did 1 day on Final Cut.
Oh, okay. Was it your
Then I went back.
Oh, you just like, this is you combined.
You know, I don't actually, I didn't really, I don't know. It didn't feel right to me, but, you know, I mean, other people, there's people in the world that drive on the left side of the road, you know, and that's their thing. And they're not wrong.
I never seen Arrested Development, so I was looking at it for the first time. But what I saw to me was that the connection that you had, what I saw together was the narration. That kind of held it for me to know what was going on, because I saw different clips that I didn't relate to in one sense. But what came first? The cutting of just cutting here and there for pause, and then the narration, or you went piece by piece? I know you said a movie type form, but I'm just trying to get the feel, because is this new eyes for me for looking at it?
Well, on something like that, and specifically that, there's narration built into the script. So when you're cutting a scene, I mean, we're not going to get Ron Howard for sure until the end, you know. So it was usually, either our producers or my dulcet temp voiceover, which I've become very good at. Which is a skill that, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have, and it's like nobody ever cares about us doing it, but we do it, and we're very happy with it.
Seriously, do you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I'm recutting scenes, it's, you're in the moment. I'm not going to stop and go get somebody else to do it. It's just we'll just do it. It's just, it was it was May 4th, and in the Bayside town of Newport Beach, that's how the 401 starts. I remember very well. But you wind up cutting it in, and then as the cut evolves, sometimes it happens just naturally that written narration sometimes is too long or too short for a hole that's there. So the narration will change, and then the cut will change around it, and then they'll both change. On that show, I mean, we were getting new rewritten VO all the time, right up to the end. Ron Howard would read one, and maybe it didn't quite fit, so we just cut a word out. Fluid.
All right, let's stay on the center for here right now.
How creative are you
Not at all.
with New Girl? I mean, is someone
sorry.
sitting with you during the first cut, or are you cutting it based on the script, or are you just basically doing timing edits? Are you doing camera angles and stuff like that? I mean, how creative is the editing process for New Girl?
Very. For New Girl or for any show. I mean, today I was finishing dailies on this episode that airs in 3 weeks. So there's a script, and it, usually holds together. And then there's footage that comes in, and it usually holds together. And when you wind up putting it all together, all the pieces don't always fit. It is more often the rule than the exception that they do not always fit. And you wind up finding better pieces that go together than were intended to. Especially in comedies, so many of these shows now are really manufactured in post. Not all of them. I mean, there are shows like Modern Family where a first cut of their show will come in roughly to time, to 22, 23 minutes. Or shows like The Office used to come in at my friends used to cut that show, and they would have cuts at 44 or 45 minutes, where our first cuts of some of these episodes were 55 or 65 minutes. So there's a lot of work to get them back down. But you wind up doing a lot. Especially one of the things I do is I'll go through and get a show together, as into a script cut, But also you wind up identifying a lot of places that things can just get lifted. So when you kind of wind up going through with the producers, here's a bunch of pitches for stuff to just take out, or depending on your relationship with the producers, you just take them out anyway. And then, if they miss them, you can put them back. You have them, they're cut, and they're on the shelf over here, but so often people just don't ever want to see them again, because they're like, yeah, that didn't really work, did it? Because by the time they've lived with it in script phase for however long, and lived with it on set, and then left it alone with you for 2 weeks, they come in and they're like, yeah, if that didn't work, I don't even want to see it, There's a lot of making it better. It's very fluid.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the process of being a supervising editor, as far as, I'm sure when you begin, you're in dailies, but once you start to get in the thick of it, how much are you in dailies in the early process, and how much are you spending your time just supervising, finishing, polishing?
That's a good question. It depends. I mean, I think you spend a lot of time doing both, no matter what, you know? Being the supervising editor on a show is very much just like being an editor on the show that has more to do, really.
So you're still assigned your, like, every third episode. You're still basically in
Yeah.
rotation. You're just finding extra time to look at other people's episodes when they're close to finished.
Yeah, basically, you know. So you wind up like sort of just being there a lot, which I was. And on New Girl, we have another supervising editor, which is not me, and I'm very thankful. Actually, when I went and met with them, they were like, you know, part of the reason, they're like, we like that you were the lead guy on that show, and we're hoping to have, you know, more, you know, maybe 2 people like that on the show. I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, you can totally finish them. I'm fine with that. Like, you know, it's fun and it's a great responsibility, but it also, you know, I'm still recovering from, it was a lot of work.
To elaborate a little bit on terms, when you say finishing editor, I would have thought that's, you know, the color and sort of the online process. Is that kind of now a standard term and it means something different than, you know, the last hands that go on the cut before air?
Yes. I mean, we'll still go to an online for sure, but a lot of these shows now have finishing editors, which is just, you know, someone who winds up cleaning them up at the end, or it's just someone that, like, you know, depending on, like, if producers just like working with one person more than everybody else, or they don't want to keep hopping around from different offices to different offices, it happens. Or just for, you know, show consistency's sake. Like, I mean, on this show especially, on Arrested Development, I mean, the whole thing, every time we went back to show something else, it had to match continuity-wise, you know. There was, I mean, it was like an 800-scene puzzle that just by necessity I had in my head. So I could be like, well, I know this one in this, you know, scene from like 405, scene, you know, 25, that like this thing, Lindsay's there, but she's not here on the other side of the room, which we didn't show then, so we can't show it now. There was that kind of thing happening. So we were just trying to be really meticulous. There was a core group of us that were just making sure that the internet didn't get mad.
We have to move along, and I want to thank Kabir so much for